In this video I'm going to explain why the author was never going to write Heian body Sukuna vs Gojo. To get a clear picture, let's revisit what was stated in chapter 238 about Sukuna's true form. The narrator stated, even when forming hand signs, he has two arms free and able to chant incantations without any effect to his heart and lungs. There's no greater advantage than having two extra arms and mouths. This advantage of his true body was shown properly throughout the entire fight. In the fight against Yuji and Yuta, because Sukuna had two arms free, he was able to continue maintaining the hand sign for hollow wicker basket as he was able to defend himself and stop anybody from interrupting the hand sign. This advantage even plays out in Yuji's domain. Sukuna was able to maintain hollow wicker basket and was beating the shit out of Yuji because he had two extra arms. If it wasn't for Yuji friends plus Yuji making him weaker, Sukuna would have won. This advantage even brings Sukuna Jujitsu to a higher realm. Techniques like simple domain and hollow wicker baskets exhibit lower output than domains, thus they only delay the time until the sure hit hits you, as they will still get overpowered. For simple domains, users use binding vow or other conditions to activate and maintain it, but skilled users only use the conditions to activate it, not maintain it. It's the same for hollow wicker basket, but Sukuna is willingly maintaining the hand sign even after activation, and if you remember what chants and hand signs do, if used during activation, then Sukuna is continuously amping the technique using hand signs, thus compensating for its lack of output. It's like strengthening a sturdy wall faster than it can be completely destroyed by a huge amount of water. This is why Sukuna's hollow wicker basket wasn't being overpowered by Yuta's or Yuji's domain. Unless you're Yuji and can lower his output to the point that maintaining hand signs aren't enough or make his reinforcements so weak, you can cut his arms off. Most physical damage or techniques aren't getting Sukuna to release the hand sign. Now let's explain why Sukuna true form would affect the fight, but to do that let's first explain Sukuna original's options of breaking UV. In the original domain clashes, Sukuna had three options to break UV. The first option was using his domain to cancel out UV's sure hit, but this meant only a small amount of his sure hit could be expanded outside so as to not break the balance of the sure hit battle inside the domain to keep him safe from UV. This means Sukuna had no choice but to limit the range of the outside sure hit to power it to break UV from the outside. This is the counter Sukuna used in the first, third, and fourth clashes. Option 2 was touching Gojo. Sukuna used this counter in the second clash. In the second clash, Gojo flipped the conditions of his domain, making the outside strong against attacks while making the inside weak to attacks. This meant Sukuna's sure hit couldn't break it instantly from the outside. Sukuna couldn't expand his range to strengthen the outside sure hit due to cancelling out UV sure hit. So to counter this, Sukuna touched Gojo to keep himself safe from UV, but means Sukuna couldn't expand his range, so he used a binding vow as substitute to power it, thus breaking UV. The third option. Let's save this for later in the video. Now let's explain a domain clash between true form Sukuna versus Gojo. If Gojo casts a domain, Sukuna can counter by casting hollow wicker basket and domain expansion, but this time Sukuna can expand all his sure hit outside Gojo's domain without worrying about cancelling out the sure hit on the inside, as he would be protected from UV by hollow wicker basket, as it wouldn't get overpowered by Gojo's sure hit, thus instantly breaking UV's barrier. Oh, this also means Fuga. Sukuna didn't use Fuga with domain because he was limiting the range of the sure hit to power it. But with hollow wicker basket keeping Sukuna safe from UV, Sukuna would be able to expand his range fully while breaking UV, and once UV breaks, Gojo would see a fire arrow, except he wouldn't know the entire domain is a death trap that simple domain or fallen blossom can't stop. Alright, let's say Gojo's domain doesn't break instantly but last a minute or two. Could Gojo stop Sukuna with techniques? Except for purple, no pulling with blue. Blue punches or red is going to rip off a fresh Sukuna's arms and stop him from maintaining the hand sign. Could Gojo try close combat? You can use domains while using domain amp plus holowicker is a simpler domain, which equals you can use any technique within that space. Sukuna can fight using domain amp while using holowicker, thus Gojo can't do it while defending against the other free arms in close combat. Could Gojo try purple? Gojo wouldn't have the time or space to pull off a purple inside the domain when Sukuna is attacking him and preventing the charge up. This was what Sukuna thought of after thinking Yuta might use unlimited purple. What if Sukuna uses this setup at the end of the fourth clash? Sukuna is the type of person that would do anything to win, whether it's taking on risk or trying to hide any advantage he has until the last minute. If he decided to not use this setup until the end of the fourth clash, forming a holowicker basket right as the third clash ends, then heal and cast domain, even if Sukuna lags casting his domain, he would be protected from UV and just break UV and into the furnace pot Gojo goes. Yes, Gojo dies in chapter 230 if he was hit with Fuga with domain. After chapter 230 both Gojo and Sukuna had similar levels of brain damage, and their RCT were rapidly dropping. For Sukuna it dropped to the point he was barely or stopped healing from chapter 232 to 236. If Gojo didn't hit 2 black flashes he would continue to drop near Sukuna's level, and it took fresh Gojo using RCT at max output to survive Malevolent Shrine. So what is chapter 230 Gojo's dropping RCT output going to do against the domain, much less an attack that scales above the domain? Gojo's RCT would get overpowered by Furnace. What if by some miracle Gojo survives? If Gojo lives, press resume on the domain or recast it, and if Gojo uses Fallen Blossom, Sukuna just cancels it by attacking and interrupting the stance needed to maintain the technique. What if Gojo tried a purple or remote purple during the fourth clash to kill this Sukuna? Gojo knew purple takes time, plus it's easier to interrupt if it's set up with a trajectory, so he chose to set it up at a range to limit this. Gojo had to put distance between himself and Sukuna so that he could fire off a red, plus he had to set up blue at a far distance. The downside was that he couldn't set the trajectory of the attack, but if you can force the red to explode, then you can interrupt a remote purple. This purple would be hard to pull off inside a domain's space, plus Sukuna can use wide-range dismantle to cancel out red. What if he increases the space inside to set it up? Remember the third option? The third option is breaking UV from the inside. Do you think it's a joke when Gojo said the easier option was for Sukuna to break UV from the inside? That's the reason Mahoraga broke UV. Gojo made the inside weak to attacks. If he made the inside any bigger, it would be even weaker. Sukuna didn't do it because he couldn't use Shrine, plus Gojo was attacking him. So if Gojo tried setting up a remote purple, Sukuna as the opportunity to break UV from the inside. You do not need to find the edge of the domain if the attack is strong enough and inside the domain is weak. This is the reason why Yuta's purple destroyed his and Sukuna's domain. If Sukuna casts wider nets of dismantle or use cleave, then Gojo's domain is done. No, Mahoraga didn't break UV's barrier because of adaptation. The result of Megumi's adaptation was Mahoraga being immune to the effects of the domain's sure hit. Once Mahoraga was summoned, it being immune to the sure hit caught Gojo by surprise, then it destroyed the barrier from the inside. The result of the adaptation didn't make Gojo's inside barrier weak to its attacks. Mahoraga breaking UV was simply the payoff for setting up Gojo's barrier being weak to attacks on the inside. Sukuna did the opposite of what he did to Yorozu's domain to Gojo's. Yorozu's domain was combined with the perfect sphere, meaning you can't touch the outside of the domain, but once Mahoraga adapted, it was immune to the effects of the perfect sphere. But domains are strong against attacks in the inside, so to counter this, Sukuna summoned Mahoraga outside the domain, and because domains are weak to attacks on the outside, Mahoraga broke the domain. While for Gojo, Sukuna summoned Mahoraga on the inside to break UV, where it's at risk of getting killed by Gojo, because Gojo's domain is weak against attacks on the inside, and if he summoned Mahoraga outside, it wouldn't be able to break Gojo's compressed outside barrier that's strong against attack. The whole Shinjuku showdown was the author limiting Sukuna's advantages with both his domain and true form. Personally, I like the way the author writes about Sukuna's advantages. He did it without making Sukuna feel out of character. It made all the fights entertaining and fun to watch. Sukuna vs. Gojo. The goal was to take away Sukuna's domain for later fights. To do that, the author took away the advantage true form Sukuna would have with his domain, thus limiting his option to counter UV, and further limits Sukuna's third option to break UV by having him not access his technique because of adaptation. Thus Sukuna was hit by UV. Sukuna being hit by UV means he can't get out himself, plus no domain means no way to kill Gojo, so Mahoraga was used to create such options. The limits were even shown throughout the Sukuna vs. everybody fight. If you think about it, why would Sukuna waste a one-time heal that doesn't use RCT? And if Sukuna had an option to make all of Gojo attacks useless plus gave him a way to truly bypass infinity without his domain, why wouldn't he use it when he loves taking risk plus others that do it and schools others that aren't willing to do the same in order to evolve and get stronger? The author used Sukuna's own mindset and nature to limit him. I end this by saying true form Sukuna would have won, and it's because there's no greater advantage than having twice the arms and mouth. When Gojo said Sukuna wasn't going all out and wasn't able to give it his all, he wasn't joking. Gojo meant it when he said he might have lost even if Sukuna didn't have the 10 shadows. They were truly lucky that Sukuna wasn't in his real body instead of an incarnated body. In a 1v1 against this Sukuna, Gojo would have a very hard time because true form Sukuna can use cleave and wide-range dismantle, can amp his techniques while fighting, counter all sure hits with hollow wicker basket, as an open barrier domain that can expand beyond closed barriers, improved hand-to-hand, can use fire arrow and its combo attack with the domain plus high-level RCT. If you gave him his curse tools, it's just overkill. The conclusion. Some Gojo fans are going start with the teleportation argument, but people isn't Gojo stated to have a condition to activate teleportation, and I wonder if the condition is the reason Gojo had to take a bullet train to Sendai or the reason he couldn't teleport from this or from Sukuna trying to open a domain in chapter 230, and if this could be the reason Sukuna was confident Gojo couldn't ran much less teleport out of his domain if he closed the barrier. I'm not going to waste my time arguing over his teleporting conditions, so take that up with the author. We were never going to get a true form Sukuna vs. Gojo. This is the end of the video, and these are simply my interpretation of the series. Please feel free to disagree.